Harley's biggest secret just leaked, and it's worse than anyone imagined. Internal documents prove the company knew the twin cam 96 would fail long before riders ever did. Bearings wore out, cam chains shredded, and oil pumps starved engines to death. But instead of fixing it, they buried the reports and blamed the riders. If your Harley ticks, rattles, or loses oil pressure, this affects you. Stick with me, because what Harley hid behind the chrome just became the most expensive lie in their history. We built this brand. Before the suits took over, it was us, the riders, who made Harley a legend. We were the ones who froze our knuckles on winter mornings just to feel the first rumble of freedom. We carried the brand through wars, recessions, and every storm the open road could throw at us. Harley wasn't a company, it was a creed. The chrome was our armor, the throttle our heartbeat, and that V-twin roar was our anthem. Every mile we rode stitched the name deeper into America's identity. But over the years, something changed. The pride that once came from craftsmanship began to fade into marketing gloss. The handshake deals turned into legal disclaimers. The pride of the shop floor was replaced by quarterly earnings. We didn't notice it right away because loyalty is slow to die. We believed that behind the badge was still the same promise: tough bikes built by tougher people. Yet behind the curtain, those people were being replaced by spreadsheets and cost-saving memos. We trusted them because Harley had always stood for something bigger than a motorcycle. It stood for honesty, grit, and the belief that freedom was worth the fight. But the crack in the chrome started with a sound we all ignored. That faint rattle wasn't music, it was a warning, the rattle that lied. It started soft, a whisper in the engine, a tick that every rider told himself was nothing. "It's just breaking in," we said, tapping the tank with pride. But the sound grew sharper, metallic, unignorable. It came from deep inside the new twin cam 96, a rhythm that didn't belong. We joked about it on rides, called it character, even gave it nicknames. We didn't want to admit that something was wrong with the machines we loved. Then the stories began to spread. A buddy stranded 200 miles from home. A cam chain let go at highway speed. Oil lights flickering like warning beacons before the whole motor seized. One rider after another shared the same eerie soundtrack, a mechanical heartbeat turning into a death march. And yet, when we brought the bikes in, the answer was always the same. Normal wear, they said. Ride it out. We tried to believe them. After all, Harley wouldn't build something unsafe. They had our loyalty, our respect, our savings. We wanted to think the company that sold freedom by the gallon could never sell fear by the ounce. But that rattle kept coming back, louder every ride, until it became a language of betrayal. When we asked for answers, they sent us paperwork instead. Paperwork that hid what engineers already knew. If you've ever trusted a company and felt betrayed, hit that like button so more riders see what's really happening, and drop a comment below. Tell us if your Harley ever made that sound they called normal, what Harley knew all along. Leaked files told the story that riders had lived for years. Inside Harley's engineering division, reports warned of premature wear, failing bearings, and cam chain tensioners that would grind themselves to dust. Memos compared two paths: fix the problem or pay the warranty claims. The cost difference, $23 per bike. That was the price of silence, the price they chose. Those documents showed management knew exactly how and when the parts would fail. They predicted which models, how many miles, and what it would cost to keep us quiet. They called it acceptable exposure. To us, it meant oil-starved engines, blown tensioners, and long nights waiting for tow trucks. But to them, it was just math, another line item buried under profits. The most painful part wasn't the failure itself, it was realizing they had planned for it. They didn't trust the riders who built their name. They gambled that our loyalty would outlast their shortcuts. And for a while, they were right. We defended them in forums, blamed the weather, blamed bad oil, even blamed ourselves, until the leaks proved the truth Harley had known from the beginning. $23, that's what our safety was worth. And when those engines began dying, the damage went far beyond the road. Riders look out for riders. The gear and accessories I actually use are in the description. Let's roll. The moment trust died, every rider remembers where they were when their faith broke. Maybe it was a highway shoulder at midnight, oil pooling under chrome. Maybe it was a dealer's shrug when a warranty claim was denied. Maybe it was watching a proud old school mechanic whisper, "They don't make them like they used to." That was the moment the legend cracked. Owners who had spent decades defending the the brand suddenly found themselves defending their lives instead. Engines seized without warning, bearings shattered, cam shoes dissolved into plastic shavings that clogged the lifeblood of the motor. It wasn't just mechanical failure, it was betrayal at 70 miles an hour. And when riders called for help, the blame came back at them. Improper maintenance, aftermarket parts, aggressive riding, anything but accountability. In towns across the country, riders began meeting not for rallies but for repairs. We compared noises, traded parts, shared stories of denial. The anger wasn't loud, it was heavy, like the weight of knowing you'd been lied to by something you loved. Harley had sold us loyalty, then charged us for the rebuild. The Twin Cam 96 wasn't just a flawed engine, it was a mirror reflecting what the company had become. Risk turned into revenue, trust turned into collateral. We didn't stop riding because of it. We rode harder, not for them, but for each other, to prove that our faith in the road still meant something, even if theirs didn't. And the worst part? They said it was our fault. They said it was our fault. Walk into any dealership back then, and you could feel it in the air, the quiet distance between the counter and the customer. Riders came in with busted tensioners, shredded bearings, and seized motors, hoping for help. What they got instead were polite smiles and printed disclaimers. Looks like improper maintenance, they'd say. Might be that aftermarket exhaust. The script never changed. It was smoother than the chrome on the showroom floor. Harley had trained its people to shift the blame before the wrench even turned. Behind every denied warranty was a tactic. Delay the inspection, request missing paperwork, find one oil change out of sequence, and suddenly the claim vanished. Some riders waited months just to be told their coverage had expired while the bike sat disassembled. It wasn't customer service. It was corporate strategy. Turn every mechanical failure into user error. We paid for extended warranties that didn't extend far enough and trusted service centers that served shareholders first. The insult stung deeper than the repair bills. We had babied those machines, kept records, used factory oil, and still got told we were the problem. That kind of blame cuts through loyalty like rust through steel. But behind those counter smiles, the engineers were begging to be heard. Inside the walls of Milwaukee, not everyone was blind to the truth. Inside the factory walls, there were men and women inside Harley who loved those bikes as much as we did. They were test riders, machinists, and engineers, people who bled orange and black long before executives turned it into a brand. They saw the tensioners crumble, the oil pumps fail, and the compensators shake themselves apart. They logged the data, filed the reports, and waited for someone upstairs to care. What came back wasn't gratitude, it was silence. One test rider, a man named Mike Stevens, logged 17 major engine failures in just 50,000 miles of testing. His findings were buried. Another engineer proposed a stronger cam chain system that would have cost $20 more to build and saved countless engines. Management said no. The numbers didn't fit the forecast. When these employees pushed harder, they were labeled difficult or disruptive. A few were quietly reassigned. Others left the company altogether. They weren't rebels. They were riders trapped in lab coats, trying to save a legacy that management was selling by the pound. Their warnings were buried under profit margins, but the truth has a way of leaking out, just like bad oil through a worn gasket. When their warnings were buried, the real fix moved to our garages. Out on the street, the riders took the tools back into their own hands. We fixed what they wouldn't. When Harley turned its back, the rider community rolled up its sleeves. The aftermarket scene exploded not out of hobby, but out of necessity. Companies like S&S Cycle, Andrews Products, and Fueling Parts became the names we trusted when the factory wouldn't listen. They built stronger cam plates, hydraulic tensioners that actually lasted, and oil pumps that could survive real-world miles. Riders began tearing down new engines the same week they bought them, replacing the weak links before they could snap. Garage floors became laboratories. Men who once spent their weekends polishing chrome now spent them measuring tolerances. Forums turned into classrooms, and every shared photo of a worn shoe or scarred cam was another line in a living textbook written by the betrayed. We learned, we adapted, and we built something better. Each fix was a small rebellion, a message that said, you can't kill what we built. That movement didn't just save bikes, it saved pride. We proved that loyalty doesn't belong to corporations. It belongs to the road and to the people who keep it alive. The aftermarket became a second heartbeat, one powered by frustration but sustained by skill. And that success hit Harley right where it hurt the dealers. Because when riders stopped coming to the official counters, the whole system started to shake. Dealers on the edge. Dealers once stood as the guardians of the brand. They were the bridge between Milwaukee and Main Street, where a handshake still meant something. But when the scandal broke open, that bridge began to collapse. Honest mechanics found themselves trapped between the company line and the customers they'd known for decades. They could hear the same rattles, see the same shredded bearings, but their hands were tied by policy. Say too much, and you risked losing your franchise. Stay quiet, and you watched loyal riders walk out the door for good. In small towns, the damage hit hardest. Service bays emptied. Parts orders slowed to a crawl. Riders who once gathered for morning coffee at the dealership now met at independent shops instead. Word spread that the factory wasn't standing by its machines, and trust bled out like oil from a cracked case. Even good dealers, the ones who tried to do right, were left carrying the guilt for decisions made far above their pay grade. Some fought back, offering repairs at cost or quietly honoring claims Harley wouldn't. Others shut their doors for good, casualties of a loyalty war they didn't start. By the time corporate realized the damage, the network that once held the community together was crumbling. And when the shops bled out, the value of every bike followed. The real cost of loyalty. For years, owning a Harley wasn't just transportation. It was a statement. We paid premium prices because we believed in the badge. But when the truth about the twin-cam engines spread, the market turned cold. The bikes we once called investments became liabilities. Resale values crashed. Dealers refused trade-ins. Private buyers offered insults instead of fair prices. What had once been a symbol of pride was suddenly a warning label on two wheels. Riders who had poured savings and sweat into their machines found themselves facing impossible choices: sell at a loss, rebuild at their own expense, or ride with the constant fear of failure. Each option hurt. Some took out loans to replace failed components. Others parked their bikes altogether, unable to justify another dollar for a company that no longer respected their loyalty. The emotional toll was heavier than the financial one. Every breakdown felt personal, every denial a betrayal. Yet in the ashes of that disappointment, something unexpected began to form. Riders who had lost everything started talking to each other, not to complain, but to rebuild. They shared advice, parts, and stories of resilience. The brand had fractured, but the community refused to die. Out of that loss, a brotherhood was reborn. What began as shared frustration soon became a powerful new movement. The brotherhood rebuilds itself. When Harley shut its doors to accountability, the riders opened theirs to each other. Forums, garage meetups, and weekend wrench sessions became the new dealerships. We built our own network, stronger, more honest, and bound not by marketing, but by shared survival. Online groups posted step-by-step guides for replacing tensioners, adjusting cam plates, and checking oil pressure. Those who had suffered failures became mentors for those trying to prevent them. At first, it was small, just a handful of riders trading stories late at night, but word spread like wildfire. Soon, thousands joined in, building a living archive of truth the company could no longer control. Local chapters started organizing not for rallies, but for rebuild weekends. Tools and know-how flowed across state lines faster than official service bulletins ever did. That movement turned pain into purpose. We weren't just fixing bikes anymore. We were fixing the culture Harley had broken. The brotherhood that rose from betrayal wasn't nostalgic. It was defiant. And every fix, every shared ride, every late-night garage story became proof that the real soul of motorcycling had never lived in a boardroom. The louder our voices got, the faster their mask cracked. Behind that mask was a truth about profit and pride that shocked even the faithful. If you believe riders deserve the truth, subscribe before you leave. We dig up what the suits bury and bring their secrets to the surface. The next story might hit even closer to home, and you don't want to miss it. This fight for honesty is just beginning. Freedom for sale. Harley built its empire on the myth of freedom. Open roads, open hearts, and American steel that never bowed. But freedom doesn't come from a slogan. It comes from integrity. When the leaks exposed the company's cost-cutting decisions, we realized that freedom had been repackaged and sold back to us with interest. The company wasn't protecting heritage anymore. It was monetizing it. Every dollar saved on cheap parts was a dividend check for executives. Every loyal customer became a line item in an investor report. It hurt to see the brand we defended twist our trust into currency. The same commercials that once stirred our pride now felt hollow, almost mocking. They spoke of rebellion while enforcing conformity, of craftsmanship while outsourcing quality, of brotherhood while denying responsibility. The Harley we loved had become another corporation, chasing short-term gain over long-term respect. The betrayal went deeper than machines. It was cultural, a symbol of American independence reduced to corporate theater. Riders saw through the illusion. We had bought into a dream, only to find it mortgaged to the stock market. And when that realization spread, even the workers who built our bikes finally had enough. Their anger didn't stay in the factories. It spilled onto the streets when workers had enough. Inside Harley's plants, pride had always been the fuel. fuel. Generations of skilled workers took personal ownership of every engine, every weld, every bolt. But as the scandal deepened, that pride turned to frustration. They knew the problems weren't caused by lazy craftsmanship. They were born in executive meetings far from the shop floor. The same people who once cheered for the brand now whispered doubts about its direction. When production lines kept running despite rising defect reports, whispers became open defiance. Union representatives called out management for ignoring warnings. Workers shared stories with riders, confirming what many already suspected. The failures weren't accidents. They were the result of deliberate penny pinching. The line between employee and customer began to blur, united by the same sense of betrayal. Some workers walked off the job in protest. Others leaked internal memos to the press. What had begun as frustration in garages became solidarity across the entire ecosystem. The people who built the bikes stood beside those who rode them. For the first time in decades, Harley's identity wasn't controlled by the company, it was reclaimed by the community. And that's when the storm jumped the fence. From Milwaukee to the whole industry, how we changed the industry. When Harley turned its back on its riders, the industry didn't collapse. It evolved. What began as a survival tactic became a cultural revolution. Independent shops, backyard mechanics, and aftermarket companies filled the vacuum left by corporate neglect. They rebuilt the trust Harley had squandered, one upgraded oil pump and cam plate at a time. The parts they designed weren't just replacements, they were symbols of defiance. Every rider who swapped out a weak tensioner for a better one was quietly voting against the company that betrayed them. Soon, entire businesses were thriving on that spirit. Forums became storefronts, small machine shops became legends. The aftermarket world exploded into a billion-dollar movement built on honesty, precision, and loyalty to the customer instead of the shareholder. Riders started supporting brands that supported them, creating an economy of integrity. It was no longer about Harley-Davidson's legacy, it was about ours. The culture shifted from brand worship to self-reliance. We stopped asking for approval and started demanding accountability. We proved that brotherhood, not marketing, was the real engine of the motorcycle world. What was once damage control became domination. The road didn't need corporate permission to keep rolling. We had already taken it back, but the suits couldn't ignore us forever. When they finally noticed, the fight moved from garages to courtrooms, forcing them to answer. The lawsuits began as a trickle, angry riders demanding justice for failed engines and denied warranties. Then the floodgates opened. Class actions, regulatory probes, and media investigations forced Harley-Davidson into the spotlight they had tried so hard to avoid. The leaked documents that once circulated quietly among riders became exhibits in real cases. Words like projected failure rates and acceptable exposure turned from internal jargon into evidence. For the first time, the company was forced to confront its own numbers in front of the world. Government agencies started asking the same questions riders had been asking for decades. How much did Harley know? When did they know it? And how many people paid the price for corporate shortcuts? The answers weren't flattering. Recalls followed, limited, cautious, worded like apologies that stopped just short of admitting guilt. But every letter they mailed out was a confession in disguise. The courtroom wasn't the only battlefield. Social media campaigns, independent journalists, and rider-led documentaries spread the truth faster than any press release could contain it. The once invincible brand was on defense, fighting not for market share, but for credibility. And the numbers told Wall Street one thing: the family was leaving, and that credibility came with a new kind of justice, public accountability. Every headline peeled away another layer of denial. Every story shared online reminded them that this time, silence had a price, and that price would be paid in lost loyalty, not just lost revenue or market share. And also with every mile, the balance of power tilted. We didn't just fix motorcycles, we fixed an entire mindset. The message was clear: corporations build products, but communities build legacies. And ours was louder than any factory logo could ever be, echoing across highways the suits thought they owned. What Wall Street saw in those numbers couldn't capture what was really happening out on the road. What the numbers don't show: spreadsheets can measure revenue, but they can't measure trust. On paper, Harley's profits rose and fell like the tide, recovering one quarter, dipping the next. But what those reports couldn't quantify was the quiet collapse happening in garages, gatherings, and local dealerships. The brand that once united generations now carried a stigma. Riders still bought the bikes, but not for what they represented, only for what they could become after being fixed. The investors saw a company stabilizing. We saw a company surviving on nostalgia fumes. Harley tried to rebrand, to talk about innovation and affordability, but the community could see through it. They talked about growth while ignoring the empty service bays and closing dealerships. They bragged about market share while riders built independent co-ops to keep their machines alive. Their charts looked fine until you look past the numbers and into the parking lots. That's where the truth lived. A new kind of ownership had taken over, one that didn't need corporate blessing. We no longer chased the dream they sold us. We lived the one we built. The balance sheets couldn't show the pride we'd rebuilt from scratch or the loyalty we'd redirected toward each other. And yet, out on the road, the story wasn't over. And maybe that was the real victory, knowing we didn't need their approval anymore. Every rebuild, every fix, every mile proved that the real value of Harley wasn't in its stock price, but in the spirit of the people who refused to quit on it or let the legend die. Because even after the lawsuits, the leaks, and the lies, one thing still belonged to us: the ride itself. We're still here. Through every betrayal, recall, and failure, one truth never changed. We kept riding. The road didn't care about corporate memos. The wind didn't ask for a warranty claim. Freedom, the kind Harley once promised, was never theirs to sell. It was always ours to hold. We carried that freedom through breakdowns, rebuilds, and rebirths. When the engines failed, the brotherhood fired up. When the brand went quiet, the riders spoke louder. Now a new generation is watching. They're learning from our scars, inheriting both the machines and the lessons that came with them. They don't see Harley as a god. They see it as a story, one with heroes, villains, and survivors. We were the ones who refused to let it die, who rebuilt trust one wrench turn at a time. The open road is still alive, not because of what the company built, but because of what we refused to lose. Because in the end, we didn't just save a brand, we saved a belief that freedom is built, earned, and protected by the ones willing to ride through the wreckage and keep going. That's what makes us riders, not customers, and that's what keeps the road alive. So when people ask what happened to Harley's legacy, we tell them it never left. It just changed hands. The true spirit of the brand lives with those who kept the wheels turning when the suits walked away. The badge might be tarnished, but the ride still shines, because the open road still belongs to those who ride it, not those who sold it. They sold us chrome dreams and gave us broken promises, but we're still here, riding, rebuilding, and refusing to stay silent. The truth's out now, and the road's still ours. Share this, ride proud, and remember, they built the machines, but we built a legacy, and it still roars today.